Alright, welcome back to the SeriouslyGhetto workshop, which as you can see is very cluttered right now. I'm going to have to straighten this up pretty soon, but I had some things out here I wanted to show you, and I pretty much know where everything is at this point. So first, these are mostly build tips. I'll show you kind of my progress, which is not much yet. But a few things I had to pick up today, because you get to a point where you just can't do without, so I'll just start right in. First is these wire strippers. Went to the flea market and found these for $1.99. You guys know I work on a serious budget. I've seen these as much as $20 at places like Walmart, hardware stores, places like that. It's for $1.99. You get to a point where you really just can't use a knife and your nippers anymore. This will do a much better job. Another thing, liquid tape. That's probably a lifetime supply. I've had a couple of places where I really wished I had this. I've got it now, and I've used it already. The thing is, some of these little bitty wires, especially down in here, you get to a point where you just can't cover the very end of it with a heat shrink tube. You can't get into it with electrical tape, anything like that. And the best way I've had this described to me, a friend that really is good with electronics and all this stuff, he told me, as far as bare wires and loose electricity goes, he said, you just think about how much poop is okay to be on your next sandwich. That's how much loose electricity is okay to be in these. So no matter how small or tiny it is, you got to cover it with something. A toothpick, I'm finding, is working pretty good. You can get right in there and put a little dab, cover it up. That's all it takes. So that's good stuff. I found some 3/4 inch heat shrink tube. I bought it. It was $2.99. I think this was at the hardware store. Had to go 3 or 4 places to round all this stuff up. There is no place in Joplin anyway that has this. I'll probably have to order things online in a little more quantity so I don't have to go out and run all over town every time I need something. At any rate, it's a little bigger. It fits some places where smaller stuff won't do, and I'll have a use for it. I also found, finally, some 1-inch, which I had hoped to use to cover some of these arms. That's becoming an issue. I'll do that in another video and tell you what I work out for it if I ever get it figured out. Another thing, since my quad didn't come with a power lead to hook the battery to, I'm going to have to make one of my own. I found a spool of wire at Radio Shack. It's, I think this was, would this turn out to be 18 gauge. 16 probably would have been better. I think Richard recommended actually 12 or 14, but apparently this will work. I'll let you know how that goes, and eventually I'll have to get a better size, but this kit didn't come with that lead, and I kind of think it should, but that's alright, I can make it. It'll use these XT60 connectors, as will everything else from now on, unless I get something that's really small. And JST's right in some place, but those XT60s are the best thing in a lot of others. And also, and I'll tell you about this in a second, why I got it. This I've got rosin core 6040 lead solder, and that works pretty good most of the time, but I have found at least one time where I really do need this flux. I got that at Radio Shack also. That's, again, probably a lifetime supply. And now let's, when I found these, you might remember the other day I mentioned these $1.50 little set of pointy tweezers. They're okay, but sometimes it's even if they were long enough, it's really kind of a bitch to have to try to hold that still. I bought these hemostats at the flea market too for $1.99. They're kind of blunt on the end. I'm gonna see if I can get my son-in-law to grind that off to a nice point for me so I can get where I need it, click them in, and I'll be able to hold things still without having to worry about the pressure it takes to hold it. So that's enough of that. That's pretty much the parts and stuff I bought today. A couple of things I've learned also, these helping hands, they're a great tool, but on some of the smaller wires with the softer insulation, these teeth on here just chew right into it. They'll leave you with bare wires. So I put some heat shrink tube over it, and it's actually still biting into some of the smaller wires I've had to deal with. So what I'm going to do is put another coat of heat shrink over there. I'm hoping it'll leave me with enough grip to hold what I'm working on, but not bite into the insulation and make a mess of it. So I'll let you know how that goes. I'll be doing that here in just a little bit. now onto the quad. I think you can kind of see what I'm going for here. I was trying to do a fairly clean build. I didn't want a lot of excess wire left over. I've tinned my PDB here. I've got my little JST on the 12-volt pad, which is one of the places underneath where I needed a little bit of that liquid tape. Some of the issues I ran into, pardon me, is getting the ESC connected to the motor. Now, the motor comes like, let's see if I can find one's right here. The motor comes with wires like this. Hope you can see that. It doesn't look like much until you put it up against the arm, and you see that's a lot of excess wire there, quite a bit, especially when you put it up next to the ESC, and you can see that, man, there's just like a lot of wire. So what I wound up doing, and Richard told me he does this too, is desoldering these pins here, these wires, taking it off the board, re-tinning it. I've got one here that I have prepared. You can see I've removed it, re-tinned the pads there a little bit. But then, let me get this out of the way. When you get to the motor, what you wind up with for the right length, pretty short. There's just not an awful lot left there. You have to be very careful about how you handle this. Now, the problem I had with this first one is that these wires are just terrible hard to tin. They're copper, and each strand is coated, and I did not know that. I made a mess the first time. Took me a couple of times to get this right. Richard told me sand them down. I've done that on this one, but I also didn't do as good a job as I could have, and that's where the flux comes in, because that's going to help to make the solder flow in. Now, what I'm going to do on the next one, I'm not going to trim these down so short to begin with, for one thing. The others had too much left over, and these don't really have enough. They'll work if I can get them tinned right. The next one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim them off about this long, about here where my finger is, about maybe another quarter to a half inch longer than they are. I hope you can see that. The reason being is that they'll be a lot easier to let the wires flatten out, spread out a little bit, and to sand them on this fine sandpaper to get all of that coating off of there. Now, the reason I'm going to be doing that is because, like I said, it won't tin, so I'm thinking this is really hard to work with, as you can imagine, to get, and I'm not really sure it's that great. Once I've got it that way, I think I can tin it and it'll wick up to this point, and then I will trim it off to this length, so that as I solder it in, I'll be able to heat it up, stick it on, let go, and it'll just be there. That's my hope. So that's the kind of progress I've got so far. It may not seem like much, but I've actually stopped after I had those first difficulties, because I wanted to think about this a little bit, where everything's going to fit, how it's going to fit, because I'm beginning to realize there's some of these things I'm not going to get a second chance on. I mean, it's not like I couldn't go get another part, but then I have to wait, and I don't want to do that. I'd rather just not mess it up the first time. So, with a little bit of luck, that was another issue with putting the red heat shrink tube over the arms. These feet, which I got at Richard's recommendation also from Flight Club, they're great, man. They fit right on there. But you can see, I think, where, let's see if I get that turned right. You can see where that screw goes in there. If you're not careful, you kind of need to put them on first, but then you really can't get to it later on, and if the heat shrink won't go over the whole thing, and I wouldn't want it to do that anyway. But so I'm working on something to try to figure out how I can overcome that, and if I do, I'll be sure and share that as well. But there you go. There's my building tips for the day. Hope it helps, and thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.